Hey everybody, I'm Rob Singleton. You've reached Ask P. Rowe.
Okay.
The question today is tongues for today?
It's a tough one.
Now, a non-evangelical churchgoer may read that title or hear it or watch it on this video and wonder, what on earth is he talking about? What do you mean? We always need our tongues. Listen, it's understandable since it is most emphatically not of this earth.
It's primal, cosmic.
The ancient gift or spiritual gift of tongues, meaning it appeared first in ancient times, is a gift from heaven.
Today you receive a gift from heaven.
It's not an earthly or secular skill that the world can just figure out. Even though it's a beautiful, miraculous, and awe-inspiring gift from God, though, people today mostly fight about it and misuse it.
Now give me my real gift.
Rather than, celebrating and leveraging it to spread the good news of Jesus Christ, which is what it's for. How is that possible? Well, listen, before we get started, would you do me a favor? If you are watching this on my YouTube channel, please hit that subscribe button and notification bell below this video in the right-hand corner. That helps get the word out. Now, if you're listening via podcast, if you would be willing to leave a good review, a 5-star review, that is quite honestly the fastest and now most effective way to get the word out for podcasts. And the word about this channel is beginning to spread thanks to you guys. Hey, let's keep telling people about Jesus. Okay, the first time we read about speaking in tongues is in the book of Acts as it talks about the day of Pentecost.
It's the first time I've ever heard him even mention.
Acts 2, 1-4 to be specific. The Apostle Peter went out and shared the gospel with the crowds of people gathered for Pentecost.
That went well.
Speaking to them in their own languages. Here's what they said, quote, "We hear them declaring the wonders of God in our own tongues," Acts 2:11. The Greek word translated tongues literally means languages. Therefore, the gift of tongues is speaking in a language a person does not know in order to minister to someone who does speak that language. In 1 Corinthians chapters 12 all the way to 14, Paul discusses miraculous gifts in general. There could be 16. Some people think there's 20 or more. And he says, "Now, brothers, if I come to you and speak in tongues, what good will I be to you unless I bring you some revelation or knowledge or prophecy or word of instruction?"
This is useless.
1 Corinthians 14:6. According to the Apostle Paul, and in agreement with the tongues described in Acts that we just read, speaking in tongues is valuable to the one hearing God's message in his or her own language. But listen, it's useless to everyone else because they can't understand it.
This is useless.
Unless it is interpreted or translated for them.
Oh, I get it. I get it now.
Yet, listen, sadly, while many bicker about the use of tongues today, there's very few that seem to care about the gift of interpretation or translation, the absence of which seems to determine the validity of the gift of tongues in the first place. It's really quite rare today that you will hear people offering interpretations to the gift of tongues. And honestly, how can they? Most of the time, so many are expressing the use of tongues at the same time, sometimes hundreds, occasionally thousands in churches.
Quiet, everybody! Quiet! Quiet!
So translating each one would be impossible in real time, which raises another question. Is what I just described the same as the gift of tongues I described earlier and that is described in the book of Acts?
You don't suppose there's a chance we're not talking about the same thing?
If not, then what is this gift we are seeing in so many churches today? And is the gift of tongues even for today? And some of you might be thinking, what's that got to do with the previous question? Of course it's for today. Well, listen, 1 Corinthians 13:8 mentions the gift of tongues stopping, ceasing, it says. Although it connects the ceasing with the arrival of this thing called the perfect in 1 Corinthians 13:10. So there's no argument that there will come a day when the need for this gift will cease, and too, therefore, will the gift. So the question is, has that day already come, or is it still way off in the future? Are we getting close? How can we know? Now, the one clue we are given as to when is the arrival of that perfect or that something else that appears to make tongues obsolete is in the following. It's that the perfect I mentioned earlier comes. 1 Corinthians 13:10. This verse says, "But when that which is perfect is come, then that which is in part shall be done away." This is the translation most still cite when they mention this verse from memory. Sort of how we recite John 3:16. We usually do it in the King's English rather than in modern English. It's just the way we memorized it. But listen, this makes the modern reader think only of a noun or a person, place, or thing, and it doesn't lead us to think of a state of things or an accomplishment or a set of events or a certain time period.
Hidden in plain sight.
So let's read it in some of the accurate modern word-for-word translations, as well as some of the phrase-by-phrase ones. First, the New Living Translation, which is a phrase-by-phrase translation, says, "But when the time of perfection comes," now it's referring to it as a time, "these partial things will become useless." Now this makes it clear that there is a new time and age where conditions will render the gift of tongues meaningless. Next, the New Century Version, quote, "But when perfection comes, the things that are not perfect will end." Now this seems to indicate that even though this is a gift from heaven for the times, it isn't perfect. It isn't best. It comes up short in some ways that will be made obvious when what is perfect replaces it. Next, the Modern English Version, or MEV, says, quote, "But when that which is perfect comes, then that which is imperfect shall just pass away." Now this seems to point to a better version, making the older version obsolete, sort of like trying to run DOS on a computer in 2021. Not only will it not be best, it won't work at all. Now some of you are going, what's DOS? Look it up. We don't have time. Finally, the ESV. That's what I use. It's a word-for-word translation and the most accurate modern translation we have today. Quote, "But when the perfect comes, the partial will pass away."
It's obsolete now.
I think it was Seth Godin, the great marketer, that said, "What got you here won't get you there." And that's what is made clear in this ESV, that tongues was meant to get the church and believers to a point and no further.
This is where we part ways.
Once again, the question is raised. Have we already reached that point? We'll find out in part 2 of Is the Gift of Tongues for Today.